Imagine
let's
you've
do this
done
one.
extensive research on something specific several times. Like some specific topic you've done research on and explained multiple times over the years, articles, interviews, etc. You know the truth and have expressed that truth in some way before again and again.
Okay, but this is how so do like moon landing deniers. Like they know the truth. They done their research. They understand things better than you do. Like they did way more research on the moon landing than I have. And it's true, they have done way more research on the moon landing than I have.
But the majority people out there wrap their heads around a misconceived notion regarding that topic. Tons of people spread that same misinformation. In spite of that, you yourself are receiving the same comments from those people who have not done that research. Like people tell you, the guy who genuinely knows more about said topic compared to the other individual.
Unfortunate intro. Like very unfortunate intro, but I guess maybe that's the appeal of his channel.
That you don't know what you're talking about, basically. Can we all agree that's one of the most frustrating and annoying things to go through? Because let me tell you, that's what I feel like this whole Miyamoto story thing is. Shigeru Miyamoto, Mario's papa and creator.
Look, if I watch Arlo's video, I'll watch it after this one. This one seems like a nice condensed version.
Famous figure in the gaming industry, man's basically adopted a reputation of having a disdain for stories and narrative in video games, even over a decade later.
I'm not raking him over the coals. He might be right.
Paper Mario, having the actual development staff completely ignored in that equation. He's often cited for going against stories in video games, with little examples properly supporting that, and is used as a crux for an outdated philosophy the man literally moved on from not that long ago.
Hang on. He's blamed for ruining Paper Mario.
Development staff completely ignored in that equation. He's often cited for going against stories in video games, with little examples properly supporting that, and is used as a crux for an outdated philosophy the man literally moved on from not that long ago.
So he's saying that he moved on from the philosophy that he previously said, and why people think he doesn't like stories. Okay.
If any of you watching have seen any of my Paper Mario videos, you're going to recognize the format of this one, as well as the topic itself. This entire topic is something I talked about, researched, and discussed.
Source that he moved on? Yeah, I guess he'll get to it in the video.
Great detail, at least 3 times now over the years, mainly in regards to Paper Mario. Might even be more with the Mario movie, but at least 3 times with genuine research. But whenever a new Paper Mario is talked about, this is still brought up and wholly believed in. Recently again, the Mario movie and how Miyamoto's co-producer, a large number of people have such low faith in the movie, specifically because they believe the idea that Miyamoto is hard against stories and narrative in games and projects he's behind. If any of you are familiar with those Paper Mario videos that mention this specific topic, a lot of what I said in those and recent videos is basically going to be reinstated here. Because for those of you who aren't familiar.
How long are you going for, Rata? Probably, I'm not sure, until I get tired.
With those videos or any of my content in my channel, I'm making this video retreading old ground for like the 4th time to get the message across that not just Miyamoto ruining Paper Mario, but specifically Miyamoto hating stories has consistently been false. It's misinformation, it's a misconceived notion, it's not true. So many people still think it's true. Massive creators and figures believe.
Ari, it says, doesn't mean he hates story, though. Where he is disingenuous in the convo is his unwillingness to admit he puts almost no focus on it. So I think that's what people means when they say that Miyamoto hates story. Like, I know when I say Miyamoto hates story, I am just kind of following the meme, but what I mean is that he doesn't care about it very much. He doesn't put much focus on it. He doesn't think it's that important. I don't know if he actually hates story. That's not the point. What I mean, and I think what most people mean, is that he doesn't think it's very important. So as long as Miyamoto doesn't think it's very important, I think, he hates story.
Leave the idea and spread it to hundreds of thousands of other people as well. I still get comments telling me I'm the one who's wrong and didn't research, despite 3 different videos I made involve several cited sources on this specific topic. Like, obviously you could tell I'm very annoyed going through this topic again on the channel and such, but I'm also making this video to try and put that whole debate to bed, because by God is it not true, and by God am I tired of seeing it. If you see people still making the claim or fully believing Miyamoto either ruined Paper Mario, hates stories in Mario, or hates stories in video games, anything along those lines, you could just link them this video. It's one thing when you spread misinformation, right? You want to correct that and tell people what actually happened, get to the truth of the matter. That's one major point in this video. But also when you're implied that you're not the one who knows the subject enough to speak on it for others, in spite of the fact you provided hard facts with articles and interviews sourced several times already. Alright, Chief, you want to circle around this topic again? Fine. With sources, articles, and arguments explained like in the past, I'm going to make this video the definitive video
I've ever heard in my life.
And storytelling. The idea Miyamoto hates stories, actively trying to mitigate any creative stories in media, not just games, he produces and makes, is an idea that is still incredibly misinformed and still
not getting to the point.
Wildfire that needs to die down. And just like previous Paper Mario videos, all these interviews and sources will be linked in the description below.
Okay.
So where and how this...
Okay, he's finally gotten into it. He better back that shit up. Like, after that intro, he better actually, like, he better deliver for real. I gotta open the window. One second. All right, Senator, back that shit up with a source.
This idea came about is usually when Paper Mario's in the discussion, a comment he made to the intelligence system staff behind the game, and when regarding Paper Mario's dialing back on creative designs and character expressions, personality and writing on Toads and other characters in any Paper Mario between the first half and second half of the franchise. But the first major example that support the idea Miyamoto's hard against stories is back with New Super Mario Bros. Wii and Super Mario Galaxy 2.
Hey, Hans.
We're looking back at an old interview from Wired.com from June of 2009 on why Super Mario Galaxy 2 nerfed its story compared to Galaxy 1.
We just started, basically.
Back in 2009, Miyamoto expressed how he used to like to go into developing Mario games with as little story as possible, where despite the Mario RPGs, Mario games aren't usually suited for a heavier story. He goes on how Zelda games should have deep storylines, but not Mario, and feels Mario games are something that should provide a much more bright and active experience, and you don't need a complicated setting where particular characters get equipped with complicated backstories, potentially weighing down the bright and fun feel of a game. Even if all you have is a villain being a villain weighing down.
Okay, I'd like to go with as little story as possible, he says. I've always felt that Mario games themselves aren't particularly suited to having a very heavy story. The Legend of Zelda games he feels should have deep storylines, but not Mario. Okay. Bright and active experience. You don't need to have such a complicated setting when you have these particular characters.
Defeat and discover they're not so bad, that's enough of a story for what's primarily about a fun experience. This being a reoccurring theme in Mario games.
I feel that even if all you have is that villain is simply just a villain and you fight them and you throw them down and you find out, well, that wasn't such a bad villain after all. There's enough story for ultimately what is just about a very fun experience, he added. A villain that's not actually all bad is a recurring theme, blah, 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 blah. Mr. Koizumi is the type of person who, whenever he's working on a new Mario game, he always wants to bring more story elements into it, as he did with Super Mario Galaxy. But in talking with him this time, he agrees and feels that with Galaxy 2, there won't be a need for as deep a story. Okay.
Since Donkey Kong. Miyamoto also mentions Yoshiaki Koizumi, another profound director, developer, and producer of numerous Mario and Zelda titles, and Koizumi has had a history.
Bring Koizumi back to Zelda games, okay? Like, look, I know that they've got him working on Mario. I'm sure he's doing a great job with whatever he's doing on Mario. I know he is, okay? But he belongs with us. He belongs... That sounds like he just told him not to do more stories. Yeah, that does kind of sound that way. But Koizumi belongs doing Zelda games. I know that he's been that he's doing good work with Mario. I don't care that he's doing good work with Mario. He should be dorking on the next Zelda game. on a
of wanting to inject more story elements into the games he makes, Mario included. Galaxy in particular with Rosalina and her storybook, but when the two talked on Galaxy 2, they both agreed there isn't much of a need for a deeper story with that game. Both big developers
he's the one
behind the
from
project
Stretchers.
agreed Galaxy 2 isn't in as much of a need for a major story compared to 1, and settled with a much more straightforward plot, while also marking with New Super Mario Bros. Wii how Peach likes cake, you could just use cake.
Miyamoto, it's not just Koizumi who's pushing back against Miyamoto's propensity towards minimalism. Miyamoto says he's also had some battles with team making New Super Mario Bros. Wii over the story. They always want to have these dramatic scenes where Princess Peach gets kidnapped, but I always tell them, no, it's fine, Princess Peach likes cake, so you can just have them use a cake as bait to kidnap Princess Peach, and that's enough. He laughed. Glutton was the word in Japanese he used to describe Princess Peach. I was thinking they could have these big ships come in and they'd have these big chains all over them and they drop down a plate with cake on it, he said. I don't think he's painting that good of a picture, honestly.
Cake as bait to kidnap her. There's also another interview on Wired.com from 2007 that goes over some of Koizumi's career and his influence on some Nintendo games. How Link's Awakening's story details in the manual that gave the game more of a story, the dream, the
Have you seen changes? The situation is totally different now. There are so many people with many job titles. Back then, the people who wrote the manuals often became the people who came up with most of the backstory for the entire game. The first real work that I did was on Link's Awakening, but at the time I came to write the manual, I did as I did on previous games, but they had nothing in place, so I ended up making the entire story go along with the game. The dream, the islands, that was all mine.
The island, etc.
This is
just
Koizumi.
A straightforward sequel to The Link to the Past, that was Koizumi. Rosalina's backstory, explaining her presence and existence in Galaxy, and being the side thing in the game players have the option to indulge in if they wanted to, also Koizumi. Plenty of
Also
conversations
Koizumi.
that reveal a different or expand on a story in both Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. Most of it was Yoshiaki Koizumi. The man back in the day used to encourage more story and narrative elements in many big Zelda and Mario games when possible. Koizumi's garnered a lot more respect and notoriety amongst Nintendo fans, especially since the Switch, which is great, but this idealism around the late 2000s to early 2010s is where the idea started. I think I'm going to make a video soon talking about the importance and value of storytelling in narrative video games. I think it'd make for a good discussion, and some of it is stuff I've talked about before, but there is a stroke of truth to Miyamoto's beliefs here. Super Mario Galaxy 2, Super Mario 3D Land, 3D World, there are many Mario games millions of people enjoy and find plenty of entertainment and fun in because of their polished and fun gameplay. Most 2D Marios and 3D Marios that skew either more towards or away from a basic plotline have tons of people still enjoying the games because of the gameplay.
Okay, I really don't understand. Oh, thank you for becoming a member, Ratatoskr. So I really don't actually understand what the point. So he's saying, like, I'm not disagreeing that Mario might not need to have a complicated story. I'm coming for your trade. He's coming for my trademark, chat. Stop him. I'll produce a song. There was another person that used to come to the channel that had another like Ratatoskr variant. Anyway, so I don't disagree that not all video games need stories. I don't understand what he's saying here. He's not painting a good picture. Where are we? 734. Let me go back to the first thing he said. Look, right here. Mr. Koizumi is the type of person who, whenever he's working on a new Mario game, he always wants to bring more story elements into it, as he did with Super Mario Galaxy. But in talking with him this time, he agrees and feels that with Galaxy 2, there won't be a need for a deep story, says Miyamoto. Does this not sound like the Mafia? like Miyamoto goes up to Koizumi, to the interviewer, Mr. Koizumi, and we had a conversation. He agrees that there's no need for story. like Miyamoto's the boss. He's the boss. What he says is important, you know? It sounds like they had a conversation means that that he's like told him no. And don't press it. Don't push me on this like you did with Link's Awakening. That's what it sounds like. So the fact that he's over here talking about that Miyamoto was right in his philosophy, right in this part, doesn't make sense to me, because that's not the point. I'm not necessarily disagreeing that story is the most important thing all the time forever.
Experiences. Mario is one of those games you don't always need a concrete or deeper story.
I know.
The Mario RPGs arguably very much do need that story, to me anyways, but as far as mainline Mario entries, I can understand this perspective plenty. But when looking at Super Mario Galaxy 2's development between the two, there's a history of both still agreeing and coming to terms with each other's ideals and such. In an Iwata Asks interview between Iwata and Miyamoto on Galaxy 2, Miyamoto comments on Koizumi, how he came up with Link's Awakening scenario, how Koizumi's good with coming up with stories, and how Miyamoto himself questioned whether or not Mario needed stories in games. One of the things Miyamoto got out of developing Galaxy 2, not scenario, how Galaxy 2, Miyamoto
was director, as a producer. We've been a good team for quite some time. You guys have worked together. Came up with the scenarios for the Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, so he's good at coming up with stories.
Comment on Koizumi, how he came up with Link's Awakening scenario, how Koizumi's good with coming up with stories, and how Miyamoto himself questioned whether or not Mario needed stories in games. One of the things Miyamoto got out of developing Galaxy 2 was how much he valued resonance, how much a game resonates with someone, and how that's more so been his goal and philosophy, not so much whether he feels a specific Mario game should or shouldn't have a story. Hence New Super Mario Bros. On DS and Wii, and why those games resonated with over 30 million people, being solid experiences, and tapping into that market of old school Mario fans and 2D platformers that caused those games to explode in sales. Alongside that, he goes on about whether having Mario speak or say specific lines of dialogue, visual storytelling elements mattering or not, and it came to Miyamoto understanding resonance. In a way, it evolved to even embracing storytelling elements.
Careful, sister. Well, I'm getting more out of the articles than him describing the articles. Okay. Unless you're careful, there's a tendency for games like Mario that can be played by children to gradually become childish. Those making the game tend to unconsciously make them that way. Taking how Mario's line can be scripted as an example, they even propose to write, "Where'd my mommy go?" When someone in their 50s like me hears their player character speak childishly like that, it doesn't quite sit right. After all, Mario wasn't a game only for children in the first place. As I make a game, I try to keep it in mind that guys in their 50s will play it too. It's not necessarily a bad thing when it comes to those things aren't essential. Exactly. I realized when I talked to Koizumi-san that those things aren't essential. Whether or not the game world resonates with you as you're playing the game is what's most important. For example, when you watch a big budget movie, you may be amazed by all the pyrotechnics, but at the same time, there's something isn't quite striking home with you. Yeah, okay.
Even if by just a little, thanks to his interactions with Koizumi despite Galaxy 2 dialing back on story, whether heavily narrative-driven or visually-driven. And to add to this, in another Iwata Asks interview on Super Mario 3D World, when the Tokyo Software Development...
Am I being unfair? Like, I need someone in the chat that disagrees with me. To, like... I explain... I'm like... I feel like I'm putting my hands on my head, like trying to draw out where... Is this backstory? Is this context that I need to have?
Department was established.
I'm not getting it.
Takashi Tezuka kept an eye on them, but around Galaxy 2's development, they were able to fully function on their own. He helped them several nights with adjusting maps and such.
You think he's steel manning? Okay, so you think what's my point again? I don't have a point. I just my initial belief is that he does dislike story.
For Galaxy, but between 3D Land and 3D World, he only needed to be involved in occasional spot checks in areas where he wanted to get a closer look. His role
okay, so yeah, he is kind of steel manning. He's just explaining what the narrative is. Okay, fine.
Mainly verifying whether the game followed an overarching concept.
All right.
Discussing the definitive difference with the 2D Mario series and the 3D games, and what they shared in common when developing and talking about 3D Land and 3D World. And they settled on pushing ahead the concept of making a 3D home console Mario game that people who like the new Super Mario Bros. Games can also enjoy. At the end of all of this, Miyamoto and Koizumi agreed on settling on Galaxy 2's premise the way it is. They still respected each other, and Miyamoto got some extra enlightenment on his story philosophy thanks to Koizumi's. On top of that, the team and Miyamoto settled on how they went about and designed and constructed 3D Land and 3D World the way they are by expanding on a concept of building a bridge between 2D Mario fans and the 3D fans with those two games. Miyamoto never deleted a story from Galaxy 2. He consulted with Koizumi on the matter. He wanted to not have as deep of a
He consulted with Koizumi on the matter.
plot.
Gave him an option he couldn't refuse.
For sure, but both him and Koizumi, the guy who's very pro-narrative in Mario and other games, felt it wasn't necessary for Galaxy 2's case. It wasn't a hardened rule Koizumi had to adhere to, and future Mario titles like 3D Land and 3D World sought towards concepts and philosophies much more rooted in the gameplay that had nothing to do with Miyamoto's story philosophy, which was gradually changing since the Galaxy games anyways. There wasn't any deliberation, sabotage, or what have you regarding Galaxy 2's story being toned down from 1. It was a matter of keeping pace and understanding gameplay concepts above all else. Nothing here directly translates specifically to Miyamoto hates stories.
Maybe it's the way he's talking that's giving me a hard time to grasp what he's trying to say. I like to put emphasis on my videos. When I've made a point, I like to emphasize that I've made a point. When I've showcased evidence, I like to put the tone that I've showcased evidence. But this guy kind of has like a very similar tone between all his different things. So I'm having trouble like latching on to the specific points of his he's talking very, very quickly.
And will always try to keep them out of his Mario games, especially when he still let the cutscenes and backstory slide in Galaxy 1. Miyamoto literally accepted and approved Rosalina's backstory in Galaxy and kept it in there anyways. The only thing that was kept secret between Koizumi and Miyamoto on Rosalina's storybook was the making of it, and when it finished, Miyamoto literally approved it and kept it in. This was confirmed in a Nintendo Power magazine issue, February of 2008.
You know, the fact that he approved Rosalina's storyline after it was completed doesn't necessarily, like, that's not necessarily evidence that Miyamoto isn't anti-story. You know, like that doesn't mean that. Like, there could have been like time constraints. Like maybe there was just they needed to get on with it. The fact that he literally approved it doesn't necessarily mean anything.
And kept it in. This was confirmed in a Nintendo Power magazine issue, February of 2008. That's one of the two major sources as to where this entire idea comes from across both Galaxy games, and even that's not all that accurate. It's still a misconceived notion that got misinterpreted and misunderstood. But now, for you Paper Mario fans, we're going back to the history books and dig up an old Iwata Asks interview on Paper Mario Sticker Star, because the other major branch of where this idea comes from, Miyamoto hating...
I don't think he was steel manning. I think his debunking, or, quote unquote, his debunking of that, like he thinks that it already happened, but I feel like I missed it.
Stories alongside Miyamoto killing Paper Mario is derived specifically from Sticker Star and the Paper Mario series onward.
It's not like he has a vendetta against stories. Yeah, that's not my claim.
Not wanting stories. In the Sticker Star Iwata Asks interview, it started around where Miyamoto played...
Just a port of the GameCube version. Right, so we wondered when...
with a prototype build of the game and marked it as a port of the GC version. And Kensuke Tanabe, a major producer of Sticker Star and future Paper Mario titles, mentioned how they wondered where they went wrong, given Miyamoto said something like an RPG would have been fine, and eventually led to the sticker mechanic. Some development later, spring of 2011, Miyamoto played another build of the game, and Naohiko Aoyama specifically restated how Miyamoto explicitly called that build boring, despite Tanabe believing they made good progress anyways. Miyamoto still referred to the game as boring in spite of the progress it made, and Tanabe literally mentioned he felt the opposite. And at
listening to you talk, it sounds like Miyamoto was a scary presence for the team. Aoyama, he was. We have no shortage of the anecdotes in that nature. What we can reveal today are only a fraction of them. Everybody allows. Yeah, a scary presence. He did. What are those fishes called in Mario games? The bloopers or something? They're of course they're scared. They don't want to sleep with the bloopers.
in spite of the progress
cheap
it
cheats,
made,
yeah.
and Tanabe literally mentioned he felt the opposite. And at the start of the project, Tanabe quoted Miyamoto's 2 suggestions for the game, quoting one of them as, "It's fine without a story, so do we really need one?" And the second suggestion for Miyamoto being to complete the game with only characters from the Super Mario world as much as possible. Tanabe also used a Club Nintendo survey to gauge people's thoughts on Super Paper Mario's story, an extremely narrow, small, and flawed survey representing a minute fraction of Paper Mario fans. Not don't give it a story. The suggestion was never a hardened rule. It was literally a suggestion. It still followed Miyamoto's main question and ideal of how necessary our stories are in Mario games. Not that he hates and will always nix stories any chance he can get. And especially
I don't see what he's talking like he's making his points, but he's bringing up evidence, and the evidence is more convincing than his interpretation of the evidence. Like, the evidence is not pointing in the direction he seems to be pointing it. Nobody is like out there like saying that Miyamoto just hates stories and is nixing them at every chance he gets. We get that he approved them. We just, it's clear from these interviews that he doesn't think it's that important. It's his own words.
when we've gotten Mario games with interesting and fun stories, visually or narratively, with just Mario-specific characters before. Even ignoring Rosalina, Super Mario Galaxy had a whole atmosphere to it, with Mario saving the universe from Bowser, going to the center of it to save Peach, the orchestral soundtrack, the scope of the game providing this epic feel, etc. Mario and Luigi partners in time, largely using pre-existing characters outside the Shroobs that still gave fun and interesting interactions and a story. Paper Mario 64 was very similar in that regard. Mario & Luigi Paper Jam had not a single new character and still had plenty of the charm and charisma and interactions and writing Mario & Luigi established up until that point. The Origami Kings almost completely just pre-established characters, and there's one specific part where you eliminate the yellow streamer after that gets very depressing and sad. The game built up, and the whole game still has this bright and colorful air to it after the fact as well. Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle and how all the Mario characters interact.
The evidence that he's showing right now is he's showcasing that these games, the ones that he's listing out, I'm trying to explain observing procrastinator. I think what he's saying right now is that these games have story. I don't think that that's evidence that Miyamoto doesn't like stories or doesn't focus on stories.
With each other and the rabbit and how much more
his argument he allows them to exist, so clearly he has an anti-story. Yeah, that doesn't track for me.
Both parties are portrayed throughout the adventure. Like, not only were those 2 comments Miyamoto made just
wait, what the fuck did Peach just hang on, let me look at that again.
How all the Mario characters interact with each other and the rabbit and how much more cartoony.
she's thinking, oh dear.
Both parties are portrayed
I know what I should do. I should not only fucking kill them.
Were those 2
I should fucking kill these rabbits.
Comments Miyamoto made just
look at the shock. Look at the shock in Mario's face. He's like, holy shit.
Suggestions and advice to the team, but the latter is something that doesn't completely omit the possibility of having an interesting story or setup for a Mario game.
Oh, okay. He sounds like he just made a point. Hang on.
Just suggestions and advice to the team.
Suggestions and advice to the team that he gave to not focus on story so much. That's the advice.
But the latter is something that doesn't completely omit the possibility of having an interesting story or setup for a Mario game.
I know that, but he doesn't like them. He doesn't care. This right here. This is Miyamoto thinking about what to do with stories.
Both
right
parties
here.
are portrayed
Boom.
throughout the adventure. Like, not only were those 2 setup for a Mario game. Alongside the fact, you look at the rest of the interview, Miyamoto was barely involved in Sticker Star at all directly. The stickers, the omission of original characters, the combat, the underwhelming and basic story, nixing Paper Mario from the RPG genre, and trying to separate its roots, that's all intelligence systems. all of, if not the vast majority of Paper Mario's flaws and problems stem directly from Intelligent Systems and the developers behind these games, Kensuke Tanabe often being a spokesperson for these games. Miyamoto, outside 2 suggestions from a 2011 game, has literally zero involvement or impact on any of the last 3 Paper Mario games. If you want to go by some philosophy that Paper Mario was killed by some developer, it'd make more sense to talk about the actual developers and staff behind the Paper Mario games and not the guy who literally just popped in every now and then just to check development builds.
Okay, it's very true that a video game development company is made up of multiple people with varying degrees of influence over the project, and like you can't lay the blame on something on one guy. Like it's very true. It's very unusual for that to be true. Like maybe you could make an argument for Miyazaki from Dark Souls because he's very hands-on and he takes personal responsibility for everything and every little thing. He's got his little grubby hands in, his little tendrils on everything, and he separates the amount of information that people have. Thank you, Naive Idiot, for becoming a member. So that's true. That's true. But he just mentioned just now that Miyamoto would occasionally come in and pop in and give his suggestions. And his suggestions that he's always talking about in these interviews are like, maybe not so much story, maybe focus on gameplay more. So if his argument is against like a very literalist interpretation of people saying Miyamoto actually hates stories and will cancel them in every opportunity that he gets, then yeah. But I don't actually think that's the argument that most people are talking about when they say that Miyamoto dislikes or hates stories. They just mean that he doesn't like them very much, and his focus isn't on them.
And had no hand in any other development aspect of the game. Adding to this one Eurogamer interview on the Origami King had Tanabe talk about how he inherited this philosophy from Miyamoto about innovative and unique game systems.
So I actually now am thinking, when he brings up these things, he thinks he's debunking them right after. Like he thinks that the next sentence after he points this stuff out is debunking the thing. But it seems like it's just reinforcing the point. Tanabe, the game development philosophy I inherit from Miyamoto is to create innovative and unique game systems. I am not against fan opinions. However, I consider my game development philosophy to be independent of this. If we kept using the same game systems that fans want, we wouldn't be able to surprise them or offer them new gaming experiences, blah, 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 blah. Okay.
Systems, using that to explain why Tanabe's ignored fan feedback and criticism regarding Paper Mario. He also used that to explain how he's nervous of the previous systems getting stale while ignoring every single other Mario series doing the same systems for their respective series for years and still providing new surprises and experiences while still being well developed anyways. That's a whole thing I dissected twice already.
And I don't dislike Miyamoto. I actually think, like let's get that out of the way. I don't actually think Miyamoto's stupid. I think he's actually an incredibly talented developer. Like, all praise to Miyamoto where he deserves it. You know, I don't even think that he's necessarily wrong in saying that some games don't need story. He's correct in some games don't needing story. I'm totally on board with him. He's probably a genius in his own right. That's not what I'm saying.
But especially regarding character designs, stories, and restrictions and such, to really get an idea on Miyamoto's involvement on Paper Mario. This interview has Tanabe outright confirming verbatim, since Paper Mario Color Splash, we as a team have almost complete control over the creative direction of this game. Miyamoto-san took a look at the game's development once or twice, but there were no specific change requests. However, all character designs have to go through a review by our IP team, and it's really rigorous. Masahiko Nagaya even agreed with Tanabe on the creative control thing, stating how they didn't want to stray too far away from Mario's universe, and there are restrictions they supposedly have to abide by for characters. Worst case scenario, we're talking just Color Splash and Origami King when it comes to how Paper Mario the way it is now. But this still lines up with how much influence the team had over Paper Mario compared to how involved Miyamoto was in Sticker Star, as well with the way they used Miyamoto's suggestion as an excuse and roadmap for the development. This literally confirms, right in front of your
Literally,
eyes,
fellas.
especially since 2012 onward, that Miyamoto had nothing to do with Paper Mario, the lack of story and originality with it, and a large chunk of the fault it has. The creative direction, the style, the theme, the charm, the writing, the gameplay, the combat, the design, the story, that's all intelligent systems. Even with the contention arisen from this interview and supposed IP team providing restrictions with characters and stories specifically with Paper Mario, when Super Mario Odyssey, Luigi's Mansion 3, Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle and Sparks of Hope, Mario Tennis Aces, Mario Golf Super Rush, Mario Kart Tour, etc. can still have all those character modifications, new designs, new characters, original designs, and crazier, epic, and original and creative stories and scenarios. All the Paper Mario stuff's all intelligent systems, dude. That's all Tanabe, Taro Kudo, Naohiko Aoyama, Masahiko Nagaya, the writers, directors, producers, programmers, like the literal development team behind the Paper Mario games. Something Miyamoto has nothing to do with anymore, nor has for over a decade now. That's why Paper Mario the way it is now. Like, come on, dude. I legit researched the entire Paper Mario.
He literally researched
cycles and
the development cycles, fellas.
To near exhaustion on the channel.
He's so exhausted.
Already.
He's so
I'm
tired.
not going over the entire Paper Mario ordeal again. But as far as character restrictions, this IP team telling the team what kinds of characters and designs are and aren't allowed, the combat, why it's designed the way it is, the gameplay, the story, the lack thereof, etc. Where, why, and how all these areas fumble in modern Paper Mario, why Paper Mario has such a harsh split between itself and fans, this identity crisis. I'll refer you to check out why Paper Mario refuses to change and the frustrating Paper Mario interviews continue. You want more specifics on Tanabe, Super Paper Mario's development ideals and process, sticker stars, color splashes, the Origami Kings, etc., with several interviews and pieces from multiple developers and people behind all of these games, especially regarding sticker star, color splash, and Origami King, just check out those two videos.
Check out his previous videos,
the whole
fellas.
thing with Paper Mario and Miyamoto is Miyamoto literally has nothing to do with why Paper Mario the way it is, especially since Color Splash and Origami King.
Even if everything that he's talking about is true about the Paper Mario series specifically, that still does not mean that he doesn't focus on stories. He doesn't like them. A lot of his suggestions have been, you know, hey, less story, a little bit less story. In all of these interviews that he's got him cited in.
There's no correlation between Miyamoto and with how the sticker mechanic was made, how paint and confetti work, how each game's battle system operates, how there are no partners, no crazy or epic stories or original characters, period, etc. Some of this I'll even get back to later in the video to emphasize and explain, but Miyamoto did not kill or nix Paper Mario, especially when his involvement in the series from Sticker Star onward was still so unbelievably little. This is especially debunked when you look up the fact that arose since 2019 by Miyamoto himself in a Nikkei interview that Miyamoto's philosophy on Mario, and specifically Mario's stories, is legit the opposite of what people believed what his mindset was for the longest time. Talking about how Miyamoto wants Mario as the next Mickey Mouse, Miyamoto stated how his creative direction for Mario
Okay, this is interesting. Miyamoto says that his creative direction has been changing. For many years, he tried to maintain a certain consistency with Mario. While this has given the character an air of familiarity, it has cramped Miyamoto's style. For example, if Mario is known to like certain foods, the character cannot suddenly develop a distaste for them in subsequent episodes. This has inspired Miyamoto to avoid casting Mario too rigidly, giving him freedom to explore different character scenarios. I've become more interested in creating greater opportunities for a larger audience to enjoy the Mario world, Miyamoto says. It's not just a sense of altruism that has guided Miyamoto. The approach ensures that Mario will not die with him, essentially leaving successive generations of creators with a template that can evolve with the times, just as Mickey Mouse has done long after the death of Walt Disney. Ragasuri says that now is when he starts debunking. Okay.
always changing.
The fallacy debunked. Okay. All right.
Tried to maintain this consistency with Mario, but has then led to Miyamoto believing it cramped his style over the years. This inspired him to avoid casting Mario too rigidly, allowing more freedom to explore different character scenarios. Quote, "I've become more interested in creating greater opportunities for a larger audience to enjoy the Mario world." Same for this Silicon Era excerpt from a Verge interview from 2017. Koizumi elaborates on Miyamoto's involvement with Super Mario Odyssey, explaining how it's similar to past projects and how they'll approach him and say, "This is the kind of game we want to make. this is what we're hoping to achieve. And Miyamoto will look at that, give us feedback, advice, and ideas. With how much advice they take on, they have this degree of flexibility and autonomy. And as far as Odyssey, he left them to their own devices quite a lot. Like, does any of this imply or scream in any capacity Miyamoto has a hard-on for anti-narratives at all?
Yes. Well, not this quote, but it also doesn't mean he doesn't. Like, the fact that he's not killing it doesn't mean that he doesn't like that he.
He left, and nothing here adds up to that narrative whatsoever. And I think you could kind of grasp why I'm annoyed hearing this topic arise over and over again. Even to game development, especially with the Switch, Miyamoto's direct involvement in games has been very minor, as he's taken a back seat and allowed more and more development teams, studios, and developers to their own devices and creative liberties the vast majority of the time.
Good.
Super Mario Odyssey has more visual, thematic, and even narrative storytelling than the last three 3D Mario games. If Miyamoto were super strict and hard against narratives and stories, he would not have approved Rosalina's backstory in Galaxy 1. If Miyamoto hating stories was true, he wouldn't have approached Yoshihiko Maekawa and Alpha Dream and tasked them to make a new sense of adventure for Mario and Luigi for Superstar Saga, since the start of what would be one of Mario's most story-rich games and sub-series ever. If Miyamoto killed Paper Mario, there wouldn't be this much information surrounding intelligence systems and Tanabe and the staff, implying it's both far more than that, and when Miyamoto's hardly referenced much in the grand scheme. Heck, Miyamoto's the dude who created Donkey Kong and Mario. Both Donkey Kong and Super Mario Bros. In arcades and on NES. They pioneered narratives in video games. This ape going on a rampage, and you're tasked to save your girlfriend from him. Similarly, with this plumber doing the same for a princess from a turtle dragon. Even if there's a strong argument of saving the princess being more of a goal,
I finished Majora's Mask 10
and means in creating this situation than an actual story, Miyamoto literally set a foundation for video game narratives back in 1980.
Set the foundation.
And even during periods, games, and examples that imply he does not like nor want stories and projects he creates, there's not only reason to suspect it's not as much of a hardened philosophy as many still claim, there's so much evidence and reason that can
Miyamoto doesn't hate stories, and he's stopped hating stories anyway, so it doesn't even matter. He didn't do it, and he stopped doing it anyway, so why are you complaining?
The opposite's true, especially when a lot of it is recent and relevant information, and when his impact and influence on many Mario games this past decade has been as low and non-existent as it has. If Miyamoto didn't want original characters, unique scenarios...
I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I think I'd probably be friends with this guy. He's probably really fun to hang out with. I think I would actually be friends with this guy, and just I could see it. We'd be hanging out in the room, and he'd just be like losing his shit over whatever, and I'd just be on the floor laughing with all the friends, with the whole crew. He'd just be screaming his fucking mind out about Miyamoto, and everybody just we'd record his ass and put it on YouTube. Take him out to the barbecue. Try and introduce him to some girl, and he just like, so let me tell you about Miyamoto. He doesn't
or unique designs, we would
tell us what you really think. Get him drunk.
Not have gotten all of those new characters and races in Super Mario Odyssey. We wouldn't have gotten the return of Portrait Ghost in Luigi's Mansion 3 and all those designs. Super Mario Odyssey, Mario Tennis Aces, Mario Golf Super Rush, Mario Strikers Battle League, and Mario Kart Tour wouldn't have provided such a vast slew of character designs and modifications if that were the case as well. If Miyamoto wanted to create liberal restrictions and creative shackles on Mario and Mario stories, Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle wouldn't have even existed. Miyamoto's the entire reason that crossover got greenlit, and now it's expanding with a sequel in Sparks of Hope, with even more crazy character designs and actual backstories for those characters. If Miyamoto hated stories and narratives, he would not have directed 3D Pikmin shorts and a Star Fox Zero animation. Not only those projects being solid and fun watches, but also animations and shorts being a medium that require a story to be had, to be entertaining and fun.
This guy kind of sounds like Jacob. I think that's why I said I would probably like hanging out with him. Jacob's, this makes me so mad. I would love Jacob and this guy on stream. I'm gonna reach out to him and see if he will talk to Jacob. I gotta get them both on here. I won't even say anything.
To make those. And the biggest example of all, if Miyamoto had a hard-on against stories, narrative, and was truly anti-narrative and anti-creative in general, or specifically story, the upcoming Mario movie wouldn't even exist. It wouldn't even exist, dude. It wouldn't even be a thing, man.
Dude, it wouldn't even exist.
You can set whatever expectations and hopes you have for the Mario movie for whatever reason, but this is also why this topic's even around again.
Jacob is a guy we had on the podcast a lot.
Miyamoto's this heavily involved in the Mario movie shows he's trying to make this an entertaining watch. He's trying to make this a good film. Forget the fact he dabbled in multiple animated projects before, once again with Pikmin and Star Fox directing those. A movie's foundation for entertainment, the vast majority of the time, is literally story. Miyamoto expressed wanting Mario to be less rigid and allow for more creative scenarios. That's precisely what this movie's doing by just its sheer existence. And now it got delayed, providing even just a smidget of extra quality assurance. We've yet to see how
the
good...
fact that it's delayed means he loves story. It means that he's all about the quality assurance.
or bad the Mario movie will be. I don't care what your expectation and final opinion of the movie is or will be, but if you're judging based off the preconceived notion of Miyamoto having a bad track record with stories in games and projects, not liking them, making sure they don't exist, always gets dialed back, and is this anti-narrative shrew that wants nothing to do with narrative.
This was a year ago. This was before the Mario movie came out.
Evaluate how you're going to judge that movie and base it off something else, because that is not true at all. Shigeru Miyamoto had a philosophy of prioritizing a resonated gameplay experience above all else when it came to Mario, but the man never expressed a disdain for stories and narratives in his properties, especially when he's created projects directly centered around narratives. Whether those animated Pikmin and Star Fox shorts or Zelda, he's approved and come to agreements with developers and directors regarding stories in past Mario games. He's often associated with a Mario subseries that's gone through such a narratively and mechanically different shift that a lot of people dislike for a myriad of reasons that I extensively researched already. That wasn't even his fault.
Researched it, guys.
He's gradually broadened his perspective on narrative and story development in games.
The Pikmin shorts are just slapstick humor, but Jacob, that's story. That's what a story is, Jacob.
A lot of modern
that means he loves
development.
He loves story.
Expressed wanting Mario to
not even a good
allow for more creative scenarios and situations that more people can enjoy. Something that is a literal foundation for proper storytelling.
Literal foundation for proper storytelling, fellas.
With this upcoming Mario movie, the idea the man has a hard hatred for storytelling in his works is complete baloney. It's a misconception.
Okay, he's right. The idea that Miyamoto has a hard hatred for stories is blown out of proportion. It's true. He's correct. He's correct. Miyamoto does not have a hard hatred for stories. But I actually just don't think that when I or other people say Miyamoto hates stories, that we mean he actually despises them. We just mean colloquially that he doesn't put any emphasis on them, he doesn't focus on them, and that's continued to be true throughout his time working as you know, in Nintendo.
It's false information, a misinformed notion Nintendo fans spread about for over a decade now that has held significantly less and less water over time, and it's a false belief that really needs to die. There you go. Here's your frame of reference to spread to those who still think it's true because it's not. It's always best to cool down misinformation with the truth and hard facts. You guys know I've done that for a long while now with Paper Mario. Please just get the idea out that Miyamoto hating stories is nothing but misinformation. I'm just sick of seeing the same misinformation tossed around for over a decade now. Otherwise, thank you for watching and listening. I always go on about gaming, Nintendo, Mario, Sonic, and more stuff on my Twitter and
my... All right, let's subscribe. Actually, this isn't my thing, but I'm going to subscribe to him later. I'm going to. Watch his end card? Okay.
Discord server if you want to join. And if you'd like, you could check out my other content on the channel where I talk and research a bunch of Paper Mario
Don't associate
and Mario
me with
in general,
this guy.
alongside Sonic stuff.
Okay.
Otherwise, stay tuned for more discussion, research, and analysis content on Mario and Nintendo. Stay super.
Yo, hey, man.
Wow.
我来呀！共和到泡泡呀！拉面，
Bro.
嘿，来面，来个面，共和再见呀！哈哈，拉面，
Let's-
共和再见呀！哈哈。
Thank you for the super chat, Raga Frio. Now that we're informed to have this proper background, can we watch the response? Yes, we can watch the response to Arlo. Look at this shit. Who put the fucking eye emoji? Who put the Edgeworth? Alejandro, why? Now, see, this, you can clearly tell this is a man who appreciates narrative. This is a man who likes all of the narrative twists and turns encompassed in a story. Oh. Okay, let's watch Arlo's video now. I think I saw this when it came out, but I generally don't remember.
Brought to you by Squarespace. Oh no, I need a website. What am I gonna do? You need Squarespace, my friend. Coding, HTML, all that scary.
Squarespace is not good. Squarespace is not very good. I think I got a sponsorship offer from Squarespace, and I went to their thing to look at their stuff to see if I would be something I'd be comfortable putting as sponsorship. They're not good. You don't learn. You literally can. You want to learn coding. You want to learn HTML. Just go do it. Go look at YouTube videos for free. It's better than Squarespace.
Scary stuff. I did a little schedule website. Seems weird. Wow. Okay, let's just come right out and say it. This video is petty. It is unnecessary. It is nitpicky. I am essentially attacking a beloved industry legend, and that is just not something that needs to be done. But you know what? Now that you know that, now that you understand the nature of this video, it is your choice if you want to engage with it or not. Therefore, I cannot be blamed for wasting anyone's time.
He right. He cannot be blamed. Do you notice how that his intro is like 20 seconds long, and he's like, it's like, I'm biased, I'm nitpicky, I'm attacking an industry legend, and the other guy's was like 4 minutes long, 5 minutes long of ranting of how correct he was and how much research he's done.
You are here because you want to hear me complain about a thing, okay? Good. Got that out of the way. So let's complain. So Shigeru Miyamoto has been doing all sorts of interviews and stuff because the Mario movie is coming very soon. And in a recent interview, he alleges to have clarified his stance on stories in games. You know, he's developed something of a reputation over the years of being anti-story. And he wanted to put an end to that. So here's what he said. First of all, it's not that complex stories are unnecessary. That's not what I'm saying at all.
Here's another thing I appreciate. He's quoting the thing directly rather than summarizing what is said. If you quote the thing directly at me, I can just read along and I don't have to pause your video to read what the thing, instead of your probably biased summary of what was said.
Story is one way of explaining a game. For example, when there's an interactive game, the experience for everyone is different. One of the most enjoyable things about a PC or a computer is that it provides the same thing to everybody. That interesting aspect is something you have to keep pulling out as you keep playing and keep playing and keep playing. I think story is just another way to pull out enjoyment from this experience.
All right, Jacob, I'll see you.
Another way to focus on that enjoyment is to focus on a gameplay experience that gets you to try things over and over again. As I mentioned, story is one way to explain the game, and when that goes well, sometimes people take the route when creating their next game of starting with the story. For me, the starting story is how to make the gameplay fun, and that's how I begin thinking about and creating a game. He says he doesn't believe that story is unnecessary, it's just that's how I create games. He's basically saying there's the story-based approach and there's the gameplay-based approach, and he prefers the gameplay-based approach. And so this article went out, and everyone nodded their heads and went, yeah, see? Yeah, see, he doesn't hate stories at all. Everything he said makes total sense. And I'm over here, like, I'm over here.
I'm over here. And I'm like, I'm over here. I'm like,
You're like, whoa.
whoa.
Whoa there. No. You can't say he doesn't hate stories. Everything he just said was true. Those two things together do not make any sense. Miyamoto is speaking truth in this interview. He talking about the gameplay versus story thing. That's true. That's absolutely true. But framing all of this in such a way as to suggest that he does not actually dislike stories as his reputation suggests, no, that doesn't make any sense at all. That is not the conclusion to be drawn from this interview. If that interview were the only piece of Miyamoto lore that existed, sure, I'd take it at face value. Anyone would. But it does not exist in a vacuum. It exists alongside decades of evidence.
Could I do something like that if I'm not going to do a face reveal? Maybe use a sock puppet because feet. I don't want to buy a camera. I don't want to spend my precious money, hard-earned YouTube savings on a camera. It's really that simple. It's not complicated. I just do not want to purchase a camera.
Evidence very much to the contrary. Miyamoto does dislike stories. He does. I might catch a lot of flack for this. I myself am not Miyamoto. I can't really know what goes on in his mind. Miyamoto was actually a pioneer of early stories in games, like having a protagonist with a name, and they're trying to rescue someone, and there's a villain with a name, everyone's got a name, and there's like a motivation to it. Like as far as scenario goes, yeah, he likes a story. But beyond that, no, I mean, like, maybe he's eased up in recent years or something, but we know for a fact that he has played a big part in actively trying to keep good stories out of Nintendo's games. But let me show you what I mean. When it comes to the subject of
slingshots
Miyamoto,
are cheap. They're
quote
like
unquote,
they're like
not liking
$10.
Stories, the number one sore spot in all of Nintendo's history is Paper Mario Sticker Star. For 3 games, Paper Mario was a series that was all about having these great stories, complex stories, loads of characters. That was just a part of its identity. Then Sticker Star came along and just stripped it all away. There was no story. Just none. It was the most basic, bare bones premise possible. And it's really funny because the discourse here has actually changed a lot. Like we were told that Miyamoto wanted them to remove the story and to stop using original characters, so we were mad at him. For years and years, we were mad at him for that. But then, when new Paper Mario games kept coming out, we started to realize that Kensuke Tanabe probably also deserves blame for the direction the series has gone. Maybe even most of the blame. Did he have to take Miyamoto's suggestions as far as he did? Couldn't he have still given us more than we got? But here's what's funny. Then people started swinging so hard in this new direction that now suddenly you've got people who are completely exonerating Miyamoto of any wrongdoing. When this Miyamoto article came up, I saw loads of people pushing the idea, no, Miyamoto's completely blameless. He was never against story. Tanabe is the only person who hurt Paper Mario. And this is a false narrative.
This is
revisionist history. All you gotta do is go back to the original Iwata Asks interview that started all of this. There were 2 main things that Miyamoto-san said from the start of the project. It's fine without a story, so do we really need one? And as much as possible, complete it with only characters from the Super Mario
Hey, we're
world.
watching Arlo to palate cleanse ourselves.
It's fine without a story, so do we really need one? It's Miyamoto. Everybody knows that you do what Miyamoto says at Nintendo.
Yeah.
He always calls the shots.
He does.
That was not a suggestion. That was just him. That was him.
That was an order from the Don. That was Don Miyamoto letting you know how things are going to be, and you ignore that suggestion at your peril. That's what that was.
Establishing the mission statement. And from the very start of the project, the bones of the project, he said it didn't need a story. He felt that not having a story was the foundation of this new Paper Mario. Again, a series with an identity almost entirely defined by story. And sure, it must be noted that this decision could have been in response to the infamous Super Paper Mario survey, which is mentioned here in this interview. Apparently, people who took the survey said they didn't care about the story. Like less than 1% of people said they cared about the story in Super Paper Mario. We can see, we have logic.
How did they get those survey results? This must be the worst survey of all time. I've played 2 Paper Mario games. I've played normal Paper Mario and Paper Mario and the Thousand Year Door. And they're way more invested in stories than any of the other Mario games, with the possible exception of like the Mario and Luigi games. I only played the Bowser's Inside Story in that one. But like, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. How did they get less than 1% saying that they didn't care about stories in Paper Mario games?
So we can see, you and I can see, something about this survey was flawed. Like, even back then, anyone could have told you, no. Maybe it's something to do with the skewed demographics of the people who were taking these surveys, or a glitch in the mainframe, or just something like that. I don't know. But any Paper Mario fan can tell you that a Paper Mario without a story is nonsense. That's a nonsense idea. To believe that story is not needed is to have a deep misunderstanding of what the series even is and what people are getting from it. And I kind of feel like that opinion can only really come from a person who is staunchly anti-story. Otherwise, they would have known how
I hate to do this to you, but after listening to this Arlo video, we're going back to that guy and we're listening to his response to Arlo's video. We might not watch the whole 1 hour, but I absolutely need to see like the first 10 minutes of what he says, and because he's probably just going to be filled with hatred after Arlo made this video. He's going to be filled with hatred. I need to see it.
ridiculous that was, and not even considered it. Even back then, even around Super Paper Mario, whatever, you go anywhere, anyone is talking about Paper Mario, ask them what they think about the idea of a new game, but without a story, those people would laugh in your face because it's just that absurd. Okay, so Sticker Star is the classic example. Interpret that however you want, but this right here, this is when we get into the real darning evidence. And this is all stuff I've talked about before, all of this is, but who cares, we're talking about it again. Yoshiaki Koizumi, yes, I'm doing my Yoshiaki Koizumi rant. I love doing my Yoshiaki Koizumi rant. I could do it every day. This man is one of the men running Nintendo. And I don't think I'm alone in wishing that he was the man running Nintendo.
I don't want him running Nintendo. I want him running the Zelda. Look. He doesn't have to do the Tears of the Kingdom, Breath of the Wild games. Just, it's even unlikely that we're going to get a 3D classic Zelda again. Like in the next 10 years. None for the next 10 years. But what about the 2D games? What about the 2D games? He could direct. They could make him director of a new 2D game, a little bite-sized 2D game to tide us over between these long Zelda releases. These long Zelda releases. These are 6-year development cycles for the last 3 games or some shit like that. So put him in charge of a 2D Zelda game to do that. Like, for the love of God. For the love of God. Even if the Ocarina style games are gone, the Link to the Past games need not be gone forever. Put Koizumi in charge of one of those, and he'll work wonders like he did with Link's Awakening.
He understands that gameplay first and story first are 2 different ways to come at a game, but he also understands that when you're playing to a large audience, you want to please fans of both perspectives. Some people, players, customers, some of them are gameplay first, some of them are story first. And if you're running a business, which these people are, the best way to reach both types of people are to give them both gameplay and story. When it comes to—
What is this? What is this? Is this the best Majora's Mask footage he was able to get? What is this?
Primary, traditional, tentpole, first-party.
Like, did he put a capture card like on an original 64 or something, and like a CRT television, And that's why it looks like this.
reach both
That's not NSO. I just streamed this on NSO and it looks nothing like this.
types of people are to give them both gameplay and story. When it comes to Nintendo's, primary traditional tentpole first-party series, your Marios, your Zeldas, so many of the fun and interesting
Early NSO?
creative
Oh, I see.
scenarios we've gotten over the years have been thanks to this man. Link's Awakening is a beloved classic, primarily because of its story and scenario. And he literally snuck most of it into the game. Like, secretly. Miyamoto did not want it there. He actively unwanted it in the game. He wanted it to just be like Link to the Past, but on Game Boy. That's what he wanted. But why would he not want it there? Can you what's a reason? I'm trying to come up with a reason. Why could he not see that this stuff was interesting and would just make the game
Why wouldn't he want it?
Well, the only reasonable explanation I can see is that he's anti-story. He ended up disliking what Koizumi did with Link's Awakening, even after the fact, despite the fact that every single other human being on this earth loved it. That's not all, though. Then there's the other weird, extra creative fan favorite Zelda, Majora's Mask.
Yes.
They brought Koizumi on out of pure desperation. They needed to get the game done in a year, and he said, okay, I'll do it, but you gotta let me do whatever I want. So they said, okay. And that weird, creepy, amazing game is the game that we ended up with. That is what happens when you let the story be what it wants to be, and you don't only focus on gameplay. You get timeless classics when you do that. Then another great example, Super Mario Galaxy. Everyone loves the Rosalina storybook. It's the backbone of the game's story. It's what gives the player so much motivation. It turns the game into this delightful, magical narrative experience, and he had to sneak it into the game against Miyamoto's wishes. He had to sneak it in. Miyamoto didn't want it, and because of that, Miyamoto made sure that in the sequel there was as little story and actual motivation as possible. Strip it all away, it's all gone in Super Mario Galaxy 2. And this is not all speculation.
By the way, I started playing Super Mario Galaxy recently. Well, I've been playing it a little bit for a while, but I started getting into it heavily. It's a good game. It's a really good game. I haven't played that many of like the traditional platformy Mario games. I played 64, Sunshine, and now Galaxy. I really like Galaxy. I think I might be my favorite.
This is official information. Koizumi himself said this in an interview. You're right. EAD is Nintendo's primary development studio. EAD doesn't tend to focus on the big story in most of their games.
Could I go back and read the Koizumi quote? Yeah, let's see. Where is it? This one? No. Here it is. I worked on the plot of Link's Awakening. I did the main story, and Kensuke Tanabe wrote the side plots. I made quite a strange story, and afterwards Miyamoto told me he'd never let me do it again. But I consider that a compliment. Oh, that caught me off guard. I wanted to do something that wasn't at all Miyamoto-esque. That really caught me off guard. Holy shit.
Development studio is the one. But even at that time, I felt like I came up with this entire scenario and a backstory for Link, but nobody really seemed to care. They were always saying, let's not try to push the story forward too much. So I would sort of try to find sneaky ways to get it in without them noticing too much. A lot of the EAD games that do seem to have a lot of story, a lot of that came from my influence. But those are aspects of the games that Miyamoto wasn't nearly as fond of and occasionally didn't like. We tend to not only gravitate to these little stories in Nintendo games, we savor them. We love them obsessively. So many of Nintendo's games over the years would not have endured to nearly the same degree without their unique stories. Those stories haven't been super deep or anything, no. And it is true. Gameplay, to a degree, should come first. Gameplay is incredibly important. A good story ain't worth much without that good gameplay.
No, I don't agree with that. I'm a story. I'm glad there's gameplay first people. I'm glad there's people that are in between. I'm glad there's people that are story first people. But I'm a story first people. Like I will play visual novels, you know, like that have zero story. I mean, that have zero gameplay and are only story. Before I will play a game that's just pure gameplay without any story at all.
And it's true that not every series needs to have loads and loads of deep story. We've covered this a million times now. But usually, not always, but usually, games do need that little extra something special, you know? It is so easy to see how that little extra something affects a game's success and enduring legacy. It is an objective fact that it's important in a lot of cases, if not most cases. It is an objective fact when looking at the greater market and what that market usually responds to.
Why do I like Monster Hunter? Because it does have story. It's just doesn't have a very good narrative. And I'm not defining either of those words. You'll have to take them how they are. It's too long. It's too long of a conversation. Doesn't matter.
It is important. And the only way you can't see that is if you are anti-story. It's the only way. You have to not only be anti-story yourself in terms of your own tastes and design philosophies, but you also have to look and see how the vast majority of your paying audience does not agree with you and say, I don't care. You know? Because that's what Miyamoto does. He is against stories in games. He's proven that time and time again. All right, just how about just...
Do I like Arlo? I think this might be the only Arlo video I've ever seen in my life. But he's funny in this video. I play EDF for the story. EDF has a fantastic story. I'm going to prove it. I'm making an EDF 5 video before EDF 6 comes out in the West. And I'm going to make... you'll all see. EDF is a good game with a good story. It's not just all about the gameplay.
One more beating a dead horse, broken record example. Okay, Star Fox. Cool game. Awesome. Time for a sequel. What's the story? Just tell the same story again. It doesn't matter. Not important. Years later. Okay, finally time for a modern Star Fox. What's the story? Just tell the same story again.
Just tell the same story.
No one in the world would be okay with that decision except for someone who is anti-story. Even people who don't care that much about story are still probably gonna see the value in giving the story the care it deserves, which is just some, literally any at all. Even from a purely cynical business perspective, anyone could see that that is what your audience is going to want. This illustrates not just an indifference to story. No, that comes from someone who actively dislikes stories. That's not gameplay first. That's gameplay only.
Holy shit.
And that is really all I wanted to say. I'm not gonna let Miyamoto hand wave away years of this stuff with one interview. I'm gonna grump about it. Okay, I'm done.
Okay, all right.